Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Real Talk. Welcome, everyone.
We're so glad that you can join us today. As you can see, it's Jill and Tia and our special guest, Josh Miller.
Welcome. Welcome,
Hi,
Josh.
everyone.
We're
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here on this. Been listening to a few of your podcasts over the past few months, and I'm super excited to be a guest and hopefully bring some value to your audience today.
Absolutely. We know you're going to bring some value to our audience because your perspective is different because of the space that you work in. And I know we're going to dive super deep into that and how you got into the industry and where you are today. And we can't wait to share that with our audience because it's different than the way that maybe typical manufacturing we think about food safety. We kind of talked about this during the prep call, is that this area that you work in, which to give people a hint, is really working with K through 12 in colleges. I almost think about it as like this food service world where it's so different because the day to day is so different. So I can't wait until you just dive deeper into that and for people to be able to take some nuggets away.
yeah.
Awesome.
No, it's gonna be great. And I think Josh, as you talk and you're like, I hope we bring some new insights. And I always want to remind people, right? Like your experience is nobody else's experience. And
It's
so
true.
just because of that, like what you have and your perspectives and what you share are so valuable
Yes.
because they're perspectives that other people have never even considered as options.
Yeah.
So so that's why
So
we're so
true. And
happy to have you.
that's why I'm such a huge fan of collaboration across so many different disciplines. It just brings such good perspectives and experience into whatever it is, whatever space you're in, and throughout the food service industry through and through. It has no matter what the segment is. There's so much value to be learned from everyone. I feel like.
So true. It's so
Mhm.
true. Including our audience, right? Like we can see your
Yes.
comments. Hopefully, if technology is playing nice today. So please put in the comments, say hello to us, and we want to hear your perspective as well because it is valuable to the conversation that we're having, as well as your questions. So please don't forget to say hello to us so we
Mhm.
can see you and add your perspectives.
Yeah, and don't be shy. Drop in some emojis or some thumbs up or hearts when you're like, yeah, I agree. Or if you're like, no, I don't, then put a comment in and tell us why so we get a new perspective as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if this is your first time here on Real Talk with Tia and Jill, we welcome you. We say hello to you. We are here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, 11 Central Time, 11 a.m. Central Time, talking about food safety and leadership and culture and how this all plays together because it's important, right? And Jill and I this week, we just did one of our workshops, Sparking Food Safety Culture workshop. And one of the most impactful things, piece of this workshop is that it was a cross-functional group.
Mhm.
And just to watch the leaders that's not even in food safety, right? And even though the focus is food safety culture, and we know we need everyone involved in food safety culture, just the aspect of talking about culture and how important it is for our leaders to have the skills to be able to lead and transform culture. The impact was just great, even with the person from finance and
Mhm.
people from customer service and areas that feel like, man, I'm not involved in food safety and quality each and every day, but I know that I have a part and there's a part that I can play. And if I had these skills, right, I know that I can transform it. And so that's really our mission, right, is to transform how leaders lead in food because we need it as we think about culture and people change in ourselves, wanting to show up more authentically and achieve more, right? So that's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
And
So,
very well said, must I say. So, for the audience here that may not know, Tia came on to my podcast, which just released not long ago, and the food safety culture was the topic, and it was like poetry, like just snapping fingers. It was like preach, preach, and it was so good. Again, this goes back to the collaboration of you're not in the school of food service space, but so much value you brought on that topic and for that episode. So much appreciation to that.
I appreciate that.
Well, and since you mentioned your podcast, where can people find it?
Yes, so I do post it on LinkedIn, and it's streamed everywhere that you will listen to a podcast or music. So Spotify, YouTube, there's a video version on YouTube, Apple, Google Podcasts, which is actually going away, but it is on iHeart, and those are the main ones there. And I might be missing one. But anyways, it's anywhere of those channels. 5 in 20 podcasts, the numbers 5 in 20. It's revolved around 5 or so questions or topics in 20 something minutes. So if you look that up, it will pop right up for you.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll also add it to the comments so people will know where to find it, what to search for.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Well, we're so happy to have you here. And since we're jumping in and talking about the podcast, I'm sure people are like, well, tell us more about you. Like, Josh, how did you find the food industry, and like, what is it that you love about kind of the space that you're in today?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this short, but it started when I was 8. And it was the very first food item I cooked, which was scrambled eggs. And I watched my grandmother do it so many times, and she had something happen medically where she couldn't cook again. But that weekend after it happened, that event, I asked my mom, can I go in the kitchen and make scrambled eggs? Because breakfast was my favorite meal. I would like fake sick to stay home from school just to watch her make it and eat it. Like, it was by far my favorite meal. Oh, and while I was cooking it, got out the cast iron skillet, and my mom came in to check on me. I'm like, I want to be a chef. And that was like sold. Like it never changed, never wavered. And through high school, even I had a job mentor, and she kept telling me for years, you need a plan B, you need a plan B. I was like, you don't understand. There is no plan B. Like, I'm destined for food service. And so that's how I got into it. I got lucky. I didn't have to figure out what I wanted to do throughout high school, and got into high-end restaurants at first, and I loved it, and I thought I was going to be in it forever. And then I realized as loans were kicking in, this probably isn't going to help pay the bills enough. And I got introduced to higher ed dining, and really saw the cool things that they were doing. I didn't even think about school food service, and just seeing the efforts that are put in to bring scratch cooking into those environments. I really went behind the company AVI Food Systems at the time that I spent most of my career with, and I never walked away. So until I was a culinary director for them and traveled full time across other divisions as well. But this is my calling, which is part of the reason I decided to break out and do this and focus on the school food service segment more so than anything else.
Yeah. You had a phrase in there, high-end, what was it, educational?
High-end restaurants, yes. I was like, I thought I was going to be in like Michelin star restaurants. I was ready to like travel the world and go into, big cities. I was this close to moving to Atlanta. There was this amazing chef group that came up on a lamb farm. We had this huge benefit dinner on a farm, and I was like, I want to go to Atlanta. And I went down there with my girlfriend at the time. We went to like look at apartments. I was ready to like checking out restaurants, ready to apply. I started applying. Oh, wow. And I never left. I never left the school food service segment. It didn't happen, and I'm so happy it didn't. I think this was more of an impact, I feel like, personally, than getting into the high-end restaurants.
That's amazing, though. Just that knowledge, bringing, like you said, cooking from scratch, and even in high-end dining, right? Taking those concepts and really applying it to, I feel like, an area that historically I don't think we really focused on. It's almost like, well, of course we're looking at nutrition and that type of thing, and that's gotten better even from like a government standard standpoint over the years. But the high end and like K through 12 dining, or just like collegiate dining, like we've all been there where it's like those two things together. But I love it that someone that understands, like what good food is.
Yes. So true. And there's, I just met one actually. He's been consulting in the Cato space. He worked at the #1 restaurant in the world at one point, and it shut down. And his focus now is helping K-12 food service. So it's not just me. There's a lot more other chefs out there that were in that same path, and they found their home here.
That is amazing. Because I have to say, like when you talk about having that dinner like at the lamb farm, and I'm like, that seems so like idyllic. Like, wouldn't that have been fun?
Yeah.
And of course, those things can still happen. They're not separate, but yet like sometimes, right, these different career paths take us in these different spaces.
Yeah.
These experiences that like other areas just don't have or haven't thought of yet. So
so true.
It's very interesting.
So true.
So how did you get interested in this part of food service where food safety and even like technology starts to play?
Yeah, so the food safety aspect was because one of the accounts I worked at, there was a bit stricter food safety protocols that were taken. So I guess locally, so I'm in upstate New York, there was a campus that had this big food safety incident years ago. And to help prevent it, they brought in a third party that it's a private firm on food safety. And they started, auditing their facilities. And, the account that I got, that I relocated to, they also use their services. So we got audited 4 times a year by them. Plus we got audited by NSF at the time. I believe that was once a year. And plus, obviously, we had the health department. And numerous times, all 3 came in 1 week or a 2-week span. Wow. So we had to be ready all the time for an inspection. There was we couldn't lack, we couldn't slow down because the next one was coming. Yeah. We knew it was. And so I really got intrigued by it. And owner of the company, I had a little bit of interest in what they were doing and how they were doing it, their auditing systems and really being thorough, because, not discounting them at all, but sometimes if you're only doing 1 audit a year, and you don't even know the experience of that person from the municipality that's coming in to audit, they might not be very experienced. So having a third party person where that they're experienced and they're going to be consistent, it had value. And so they actually reached out and were looking to actually ask me to get a certification, certified professional food safety, which I ended up getting. And I take it very seriously just because of that experience that I was in. And additionally, it kind of falls outside the realm, but it seems to be coming in more and more, is food allergy safety. And that I was in a situation where we as a organization weren't doing very well for multiple reasons, systematic reasons, weren't doing very well with accommodating food allergies. And, to get the exposure to someone that has an allergy or an intolerance and understanding how food impacts them, if it's not prepared safely on our end, that hit home for me. And it just made me even more passionate about the safety aspect of things. So it kind of was just a situation I was in, and I just kind of geeked out over it. And same thing with technology. I love bells and whistles. Don't ask me to build the bell and whistle, but I love using them and learning about them. And so that's just how the technology piece fell into it. So
nice.
So, there's technology, right? In the past, 10 years, right? It's kind of exploded with all the different options available. So I'm curious, even as you started venturing into the space, what types of gaps or opportunities kind of had you go, there's something more that we need in this space?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the biggest aha moments was being a part of a major organization and realizing that we were going around with pen and paper to do these safety audits all over, the entire company. And then you have a home office, and we're going around on paper, putting down information, going to a computer, entering it again, sending it to someone to manually look at it. And you really didn't have much insight. And so when I started coming across platforms that can do that for you, I was like, oh, wow. And then there's like a dashboard so you can actually see exactly what's happening at multiple locations at the same time. You can see where your downfalls are, and you can really start to nail it down as an organization. Hey, this is telling you that this safety thing is a problem at 50 of your 75 accounts. Okay, now we can start to take that insight and figure out how can we make it better. And I was like, wow, like this technology is a good place to start with helping us, not just from one location, but even from infinity amount of locations. And that's where it really like sparked the light bulb in me to really start keep learning what options are out there.
Yeah, because being able to trend and, like you said, have these insights on what's happening at not just one location, but multiple locations, and being able to compare, right? Because we know each location, just like in manufacturing, each facility, they have their own culture, they have their own staff, they have different managers, right, that like to do things differently. So having this data and being able to trend and compare results is extremely helpful, and technology allows for us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you gave me 50 spreadsheets and said, figure out where our downfalls are, I'm just going to walk away. like it's just, no, thank you. This isn't for me.
That's awesome.
Well, and all of that work is in like the K through 12 and college space. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of food safety and needing those kinds of tools, a lot of people are still manual, though. A lot of people are still manual, which is fine. You know, there's not going to be a transformation overnight. Not everyone needs it, quite frankly. The smaller organizations, you know, you really have to do the pros and cons with the investment at that point. But it's definitely being more and more adopted and accepted. So it's a slow transformation still, but it's still very open.
Yeah, I think that you just hit on a really good point that I think our audience, like even as they're thinking about onboarding technology, you kind of talked about like, where are you in your business, right? Really small businesses, it might not be worth the investment for them. But as you grow, right, that investment looks different and what you're managing looks different. So even as people are thinking about, do I need this technology? Doing that cost benefit analysis on, is my organization ready, number one, for this technology, and is it going to be beneficial to what we do? And, you know, I like for organizations to do that each year, because it's like sometimes we're too late on implementing technology, and then it just makes it so much harder to get it through your system. True. You know, so it's like it's that balance. And so let's think about, even as people are thinking about, how do I use technology as a solution for food safety?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm a big fan of, you know, program planning strategically over time. A strategic plan shouldn't like just be one and done. It should be a few years out, and it should be every aspect of your operation, including technology, because it's not just food safety. I mean, you're competing with sustainability, you're competing with the cooking equipment. Everything is trying to get into technology that wasn't there a few years ago or wasn't as prominent. So you have to really plan it out and prioritize what's important. What is the return on investment going to be for each individual and organization?
Yeah, so true.
It is. And even, I know, like on Monday, because we had our prep call Monday, right? Some of the what we talked a little bit about were, you know, if you don't do the strategic planning, like what other parts maybe get missed or are required before you can even implement technology. So something is basically talked about, like emails. Like not everybody has an email. So if the system is linked directly to an email, like IT may have to do some pre-work, right?
For the record, I will never, ever recommend to an organization to do a software that your entire team, your entire workforce needs to use, but it requires an email address and password. I will never recommend that. I've seen it fail. It's a lot more work than it should be. Let's put it that way. You know, we have to realize that in this food service industry, especially, there's people that are not necessarily from this country. We have a lot of people coming into the country and they kind of fall into the industry and they don't have an email address. and the English might not be their first language, and so now you're going through two different barriers. And if they can't log into whatever platform you're requiring them to have an email and password for it, if they forget that password, now they have to log into the email that they never used in the past 5 years to retrieve that password, to go back in and use their email and password for your software. So I will never ever recommend that, just because it's not efficient for the people that are trying to lead that kind of a technology. There's other options out there that make it a lot simpler for login.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating when you brought that up, because it's one of those things that you think about. Oh, everyone has an email, right? Everyone has an email. That shouldn't be a barrier. But things like, it's almost like, do your due diligence to understand your culture, right? Your organization, people, because there's a lot of people that do not. And you gave a lot of great reasons on why you might run into staff, right, that doesn't have an email, or if they do, like you said, they haven't checked it forever, and so now they have to figure out how to get into it. We've even been there with, like, we use our email and we're like, okay, I haven't signed in a while. How do I get into this
exactly
program, right? And so that's just such a good, I think, a good point that I didn't think about until you even brought that up. I'm like, yeah, that's a barrier.
Yeah, and it's not everybody's like point of use for things either. I mean, I have kids, they have a couple emails, and I'll be like, well, did you get in an email? And they're like, well, I would never even think to look there.
Oh yeah.
So even generationally, like, they're like, no, if it's not in the app, then where else would I look?
Right.
It's another very good point.
True.
Yeah, I've been coming across that as well, in terms of the generational gap with using email. So true.
Yeah. One of the oh, go ahead.
No, you, Tia, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask about, one of the technologies that I know that you talk about is video training that you've done with your teams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a tech company. Again, I'm not the tech guy. I don't build the bells and whistles, but there is a tech company that does have this great system. It's called Pineapple Academy, and I'm partner with them as a licensed reseller of their technology. And essentially what they've created is like this professional YouTube for the frontline workers and operational workforce. And it's secure. It's not YouTube, so don't think that you can go on YouTube and do your own things. It's a secure platform and system, but it's all designed for content, 5 minutes or less. So think that someone that is just starting on your team and they've never picked up a knife before, or you're asking them to operate a $250,000 dish machine and they haven't touched one before, right? And this gives the capability where you can scan a QR code. It can be on the side of that equipment. It can be in a recipe. It can be wherever you need it. And instantly they get a video, 5 minutes or less. And it's going to lead them through that task or skill that they need to know in that moment. And guess what? The manager didn't have to be there, and the manager doesn't have to be there when they need a third refresher or a fifth refresher. They know where that information is, and it's multi-language friendly. Subtitles. You can go into different languages, voiceovers, even if you want to get into that. So it's such a cool platform, and you can track and verify like who's watching what content, when did they watch it. So it's a great tool, not only for the onboarding side of it, but just continuous training, because there's too much to keep up with manually, quite frankly. We all know that the COVID kind of made it worse what we were already dealing with the industry, and wearing multiple hats as leaders and not enough time in the day and not enough resources. So this really helps to instantly expand your bandwidth and resources and your operation. And while there is a library of content, you can actually create your own. So you can say, this is what I need to set up my salad bar. This is what I need to use this thermometer that we have that might be linked to a cloud. You can create content that's based on whatever you need in your operation, including safety.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Even thinking about shorter videos, especially when you think about food service, right? And when you talk about like turnover, seasonal turnover, even in the manufacturing world, we talk to a lot of people about temporary turnover, right? From an organization that's either seasonally or there's limitations, right, to temporaries. They're temporary employees. They eventually leave and new people come in. So having something that is, when we think about like this type of technology, having something that's easily accessible and quick, for them to learn on the spot, but also a refresher to learn these tasks on the spot.
Yeah, exactly. And their login for that to track the videos is an access code. You can give it to them. It can be the last for their social. It can be the last for their employee ID. It can be whatever you want. So it's literally just a 3 or 4 or whatever digit pen you want it to be, and boom, now you've stamped that they've watched a piece of a course.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and even to
not an email address.
But I assume if you can do videos, like you said, there's a library and you can also do your own. It must be is it pretty easy to use also to create videos to put in?
Funny enough, so next week I will be going to Kansas City. They are actually launching a new version of their software, of their platform, and it's part of the update is making it even easier to add content on site, pretty much instantly, where you can add content to the platform that is custom to your location. So you can do whatever you want. You can bring in a full video production team if you want to, or you can just shoot it from your phone. We have a third party that digitally remasters the content and makes it look very beautiful for like a fraction of the cost. And you're using an iPhone. Yes, there's so many options with that, and this software update that is being revealed next week is one of those updates.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. Coming from the manufacturing world, that's always one of the challenges, right? There's super long lines, and like operating this equipment versus that equipment is different. And typically where I've worked, it's wet environments. So you can't just leave documents out, even if they're in like you can't leave documents out, even if they're protected, because they will just get wet. So to be able to be more creative on like, how do we make sure it is accessible? Since that is actually one of the requirements when it's, whether it's regulatory or if it's like a GFSI scheme.
Yeah.
But how to do that. So this sounds like a fantastic option to be able to even explore for really making that like easy to use and easy to create.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I just think
about
is in a restaurant, right? In a kitchen or while you're serving, even in like a quick serve, location where it's like, even when you think about people, like you said, that might have never handled a knife before, or might have never done temperature checks, might have never even thought about these steps that we need to put into place for food quality or food safety, or even operational, right? And so it's nice that you're able to have that at your fingertips for someone that's coming in and learning in the food industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're taking this technology to way past the food service industry in all segments. Like you said, restaurants. I just spoke with someone last week with multiple restaurants that is interested in it, and manufacturers, even equipment manufacturers. So it's going to keep growing as an organization, and it's only going to help this industry as well, especially, which is obviously where the bulk of my interest is.
Right. Yeah.
I always love, because no matter how easy it sounds or how fantastic it sounds, there's still always challenges. Like, what have you seen as you've been working in this space?
Well, I would say the challenge is the onboarding process of getting new technology implemented, whether it's that or anything else. If you lay a piece of technology onto a leadership team or a leader, that's half the battle. That's not implementing it. That's not getting it actually into your workforce. That's not creating the custom content. That's not, even if it's temperature checks, right? Does your menu need to go into that system so that it's automatically popping up the menu item for that day? Like, there's so many different steps with getting technology not only set up in general, but also for your location. So for example, I'm working with 2 different technology softwares, and you have to consider what are you going to do if you require or you're going to want your workforce to use their phones? Is that okay in your organization? Do you have to give stipends? I just heard California is passing some law that's making it more difficult to require your workforce to do that. So you need to consider that. And if that's not the case, then what about tablets? Right. And then if you're going to do tablets, who's going to supply it? Am I as a consultant going to supply it and have to remotely manage it? Or are you going to supply it internally? Your IT department has to get involved now, making sure that it's safe for their network. So there's so many other steps that gets involved just to implement these things. It's not just up and running in one day. And that's where a lot of value comes with bringing me into the picture, is I'm kind of that champion to help lead it on, because I've seen it, I've heard it. You implement technology and you end up ripping it out because you had no one to actually own it. And you're like, okay, we have to reset, find someone to own it, and then we can implement it. So I'm actually starting to see some organizations, even from the training standpoint, bring in someone that is dedicated for training and development. Because even though you're bringing in the technology, it means nothing without a champion.
Right, exactly. You know, one thing, so you said a few things. The first one is around the setup, right? That implementation. I've definitely seen software implementation fail because someone who already has a full plate, right? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to implement this technology solution. Right. And like really, they have no time to implement all their recipes and implement all their ingredients and implement, you know, whatever it is that the technology is doing, upload all the videos, make all the videos. When sometimes businesses, they underestimate what it takes to actually get something up and going, where a lot of times you need a dedicated resource, even if it's only for 6 weeks or 6 months, depending on how long, you know, implementation would take. Even if it's for just that period, you really do need that dedicated person or persons to help manage that implementation, because that's like your first, it's almost like the first experience your teams are going to have with it, right? And you want it to be a positive one. Everyone's already like, oh, new technology, right? Like I gotta do something.
Exactly.
Already there. So for us to then try it and it's like, oh, it doesn't work, or it's harder, and it's because really the people that are implementing it, this is not really a true priority for them, then you're already on the path of failure.
Yep, exactly. Which is, and some people some organizations understand that up front, and some of them kind of need to fail a little bit, unfortunately, to really see the value. And okay, we probably shouldn't be doing this all internally.
Right.
There's actually one example where I'm being subcontracted literally to integrate content into another technology, because they don't have anyone to do that. That's hours and hours of work that needs to be done to help make it successful. So like having a resource that can help you get that up and running, and no matter how small or how big, you need them involved.
Right.
That's just going to help make sure it's successful.
Yeah, they're smart to recognize that they need someone to help with that.
Yeah. Well, and even some of the other barriers, because I've been in implementations where people say, well, you know what? Nobody will know our system or know our processes to be able to set it up for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so even like when you come across that, like how do you kind of navigate that with them? Because I don't know about you, but I kind of look at it, I'm like, yes, there are nuances in the differences we have, but in general, we're all receiving, we're doing this, we're making something, and then we're delivering.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point, which is why up front, I make it very, very easy to understand that I'm not just a tech person. I'm operational mindset. This is a technology that we're using together as a tool. My role is to actually come in and understand your nuances from the jump. This isn't like, okay, I'm just going to kind of, do a boilerplate thing. And then if you need something, I guess you can reach out. Like, no, from day one, I want to understand what your nuances are so I can help you be successful. And some people, it's not as a priority, where they're like, no, we're good with just, the simple content that's there. But, I had someone else where they're like, I'm not sure if I want to use any of it. I have 9 different concepts and I want custom content for each and every concept, right? So it's very case by case basis in that aspect. And that's the great thing about bringing in a partner such as myself is I have that operational mindset where I'm not going to just leave you high and dry. I'm there through and through.
Yeah, and you
And you can even reach out, months down the road, years down the road, and say, all right, Josh, we need to do another reset, or we have a renovation company, coming, or new equipment, and I can jump right back in where I left off and help.
Yeah. One other thing that you mentioned is around this ownership, right? Where organizations, they bring in this technology and then they kind of like dump it on someone and it's like, okay, good luck. Now you own this, right? And then the person gets promoted or leaves the organization. Now no one owns it.
Yep.
Have you've seen, we've all experienced and seen this happen where, again, is leading to the organization devaluing the technology and then ripping out the technology because they really didn't have someone that could own it from a sense of ownership or know how to own a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that at a massive scale, not just a one-by-one case scale. I have seen it massively. And, my solution to that is slow and intentional rollout. Let's not just come in guns blazing and say, this is the solution. There needs to be some testing throughout, especially when you're talking about new technology. And more importantly, if you're talking about two different technologies that need to work together, you have to test it out before you decide to commit to it, number one, before you sign a contract, and number two, before you decide to roll it out to your team, whether it's leaders or the entire workforce. You need to be slow and intentional in testing, trial and error, figuring out where the bumps along the road are. So in some cases, it could be as simple as a rollout that's, a few weeks from now. But in other cases, such as another project I'm working on, we're talking months, if not a year, before we are going to actually roll out a significant solution, because we, again, thinking slow and intentional. We don't want to roll this out and figure out after we've committed that there's bumps in the roads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a culture piece too to this, in the sense of, how you roll out a piece of technology in one organization or at one site might look different than another site or another organization. And it's because those people are different. Mm-hmm. So even with the rollout, you need leadership skills to be able to influence the teams, to be able to say, hey, this is why we need this technology here. This is how it will help you, right? And even other ones that people don't think about, but at Catalyst we do, obviously. We think about that you have to have those active listening skills on what's important to your staff and what areas of the technology do they feel like they're going to use most, how they feel about the areas you're trying to get them to use, and obviously creating those safe spaces and relationships that they're able to easily give you this information, so that if you roll out technology, which I've seen this too, you roll out technology, you think this is exactly what people want, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, this doesn't do everything I need it to do, and now all these other things are coming up when we had to tackle this ahead of time, right? Having those conversations, listening, incorporating feedback. If we've done that early on, then again, that implementation phase runs a lot smoother.
So true. And feedback piece is huge. I think I tell everyone, because, some leaders, they get a little bit antsy about, okay, we're just going to open up feedback for anyone to give us on us. And it's like, that's not a bad thing. Right, yeah. That's not a bad thing. Get the feedback. And obviously some of it is going to be very valuable, and some of it you may need to take with a grain of salt. But it's not, just don't get any feedback from them, which is why I encourage with any, program that's new, especially the training program, get feedback from your team before any new start, and then get feedback 90 days out. Let's measure. You can only manage what you measure. So let's get feedback, get surveys out to them and listen to them. Let's identify the cheerleaders in your organization. Because there's key people that have influence over a lot of others. So if you can get them on board and bring them into, maybe like the testing and trial piece and get them excited, they can help spread the good word to the rest of the team. Right. And that goes all the way down to if you have different languages, right? So, there's one place that has 5 or 6 different languages. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to find the leaders in those different languages that are spoken on campus, get their feedback, and then if it goes well, they can help spread the word to the other people that speak their language. Yeah. So it's really, there's a little bit of psychology with that too, but it's definitely needs to be intentional in getting and accepting feedback. Yeah. It's so huge.
So important.
And what I keep hearing you say, and I love it, is like slow and intentional.
Yes.
Yeah. Like we always have this desire to like move really fast, especially because it seems like things are moving so quickly around us. And especially with software. Do you find, because people are like, well, if I don't have an app for it, like why would I want to go slow? Like there's so many things that should be available right at our fingertips.
Yeah. And that goes to the culture piece. When they say there isn't an app and we can roll this out, today, but they say, nope, let's wait a few months. It's culture driven. They don't want to go in and overnight make this big, huge change and have there be an uproar. They want to make sure, again, we're getting the right people on board, making sure there's no kinks, really being deliberate in how we showcase it and kick it off, if you may. Very intentional in that, and it ties into that C word there, culture.
Yes.
It does, right? Because you've probably seen too, like too often, we've talked about it already, right? We jump in and we go, we haven't been intentional. We haven't prepared people. We haven't even prepared ourselves for the change. And then either it gets ripped out or nobody uses it, and that's just all failure cost.
Yeah.
So, our goal isn't to add additional cost to our business process. It's really to streamline and make it easier for people, make it easier for business.
Yes.
So true. That's the name of the game I like to play is, let's not fail. I hate failing. And that's why I developed a reputation for just kind of being overly detailed. I'm like, people use the word detail oriented, but I'm kind of up there. I would go head to head with anyone with details. So I think that's part of the reason why.
I feel like a fine dining chef. I feel like that is like a qualification, attention to detail.
Yeah, yes, that's so true. I credit a lot of who I am today from the chef that I worked under that could have been a Michelin star chef. He was that kind of quality and that well respected. And I got screamed at so many times over, salads and, so when I'm starting off, just screwing up the littlest things. But it really made me pay attention to details, and that I carried throughout the rest of my career. So you actually said something that's very, very true that I hold dear to my heart is details started in that for me.
Well, I only know from watching cooking competitions on TV. Not because I'm a chef or a cook by any means.
Same is true there.
Well, I like this conversation because sometimes I feel like that even people that we run into as we talk about like food safety culture, they focus so much on the technical aspect of things, which I would say is the technology piece. But you brought up so many, and as we've had this discussion talking about how you have to bring people along with you, and that's the culture piece. And so I just for our audience to think about like just that full term of food safety culture. Food safety is that technical piece, right? It's the technology we're onboarding. It's the why from a technology and program standpoint, we're onboarding it. But you cannot forget the people. You cannot forget human behaviors. And like you said, like the psychology behind it on how to even influence and how to move people forward and how to go through change management from a people standpoint. Like all of that takes skill. It doesn't just happen for most people.
Yep.
You have to learn how to do that. You have to practice how to do it. You have to mess up and say, okay, maybe people weren't there. So, right? We got the feedback, right? That
Yeah.
with us. What do we do next, right? To get people with us and not moving on until that happens, right? Because that's so
Yeah.
important to rolling out, right, this technology and getting the results you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, and a part of that is, I think, people skills for sure. Because if you're strictly technical and managing from that aspect, you just kind of go off of numbers and facts. But that's going into some soft people skills for sure in terms of the culture piece, because you can't be a drill sergeant when it comes to this. You have to be personable in some situations to help get people to understand why change is coming. Change is hard for everyone in so many levels. So this is a big change possibly for an organization. So you need to make sure that you're helping make people more comfortable and understanding of the change, and that is definitely more of a people skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tia, I felt like you were leading us in, both of you, into like sharing that Catalyst online learning is open. Because that's the part where, when we think about the technical part, like the people skills that come along with it, that's why we put those together to offer them to people, so that it's more than just the technical side. And there are nuances of working with people that we often haven't been taught to do well, or that we've thought of, or a lot of what we're taught to do is look outward versus looking inward, to think about how we're showing up and treating people. And really, that's part of what our online learning is about.
Yeah.
So I'm putting my shameless plug out there.
As you should.
Yeah, as you should, right? And it's a good one, because the ones that we launched with, they really are those skills of how do I empower my team, right? Which is all around ownership behind how do I empower them to take things like a new technology and run with it. So I'm not always the person that's like, oh, we have to do this, right? I have to remind this, but you're really empowering them, or we like to say, giving them the power, right, to be able to manage it on a day-to-day. And as someone gets promoted or moved out, right, like that team has that empowerment to be able to make decisions. So the next leader coming in, they will have that power. It's expected for them to have that power. And then even conflict, right? Like there's going to be some conflict. Talk about that feedback. Like there's going to be some stuff that comes up where it's like, we need to do it, and people are like, no, I don't want to. Right? Like just how to navigate it. And it's so funny, because I was talking to someone recently when we were doing the Sparking Food Safety Culture workshop, and literally one of the biggest pushbacks we see is around technology, right? Like, we have this new technology, the organization bought it, and then no one's using it, or using it the right way, or pencil whipping stuff. And you think, well, we just need to force them to use it, or just these aspects of really not taking into account what your people need, and understanding as a leader, there are things that you can control and there's things that you cannot control, and helping your team realize that, right? Like if your organization bought a software, you can't control that, right? Like most of the time, most people are not in a role that they can influence that or control that decision. However, how you use it, there might be some aspects there that you can control or influence how the organization is going to move about it. So you focus your efforts there. That is a skill to get your team there and get them through this conflict. And so it's like, we can talk about the people side of things all the time, because that's where our passion lies. But we don't, like Jill said, we don't typically think that way, because that's not how we're taught, nor is that how we were even celebrated in our careers, right? We're celebrated because we get all these, accolades behind our name, or, because we're growing from a technical standpoint. But at some point, right, we run into a wall because we don't have these people skills. We don't have these leadership skills to help us through. And they're just as important, if not more important, as you become a leader, a stronger leader, a more broader leader in your organization.
Yeah, Absolutely. And you were touching on the frustration when a company does adopt a technology and everyone's frustrated with it.
Oh,
You know, you have to ask, was it the right technology? You
ooh,
know, who made the decision? Who was
Yeah.
involved in the decision-making process? It should be more than just the people that are over-financed, right?
right.
It should be more than just the people that are, you know, normally behind the desk. If you're actually expecting the people that are not behind the desk to be using it, you need to have really good wide viewpoint of opinions before
Mhm.
you decide to adopt them, and that goes with every part of the kitchen, even down to the equipment you choose. So it's not just technology. You need to make sure that you have a very open environment when it comes to making big decisions.
Yeah. I thought it was fantastic when you talked about like getting someone in the room that's representative of all these pieces. You used the example of language, right? Getting people in
Hmm.
the room and being open to that feedback. I think that's so critical.
Even
Yep.
at the front side, I don't know how many times, I've encountered something where you're like, hey, there's this really cool technology we can use. And when you start talking to people, they're like, oh, we didn't even know that there was a problem, but we can actually fix it right now like this.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And so if you can like branch out and have those conversations, sometimes you find like, gosh, maybe the technology is really helpful, but there also might be a fix even internally
Hmm.
before you adopt the technology so it can even be more effective
Yeah.
or a better
Yes.
tool. Because it's meant to be a tool and help us as humans.
Right.
So true, which is why IT is normally one of the people that have a seat at the table, because they normally know what is already internal and what capabilities there are and aren't. So
Yeah.
IT normally has one of those chairs for sure.
Yeah. I think that goes back to Josh, to that strategic planning that you're talking about. On like where are
Hmm.
we today and making sure we really understand that current state and where we want to get to.
Hmm.
I thought that was something fantastic that unfortunately a lot of organizations do not do, right? It's amazing to
Yes.
think about, but they really don't think about it in that way on what do we want the technology to even do for us today versus, into the future on how we're growing. That's so important.
Hmm.
It is.
So true, and it helps with budgeting too when you're planning that far ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is important, right?
Mhm.
So true.
Wow. So
It,
we have covered a lot of different areas from like why we need technology, owners of technology, implementing culture, all kinds of things. But Josh, if someone's in the audience, what are like 2 or 3 things that you hope that they take away from the talk today?
Yeah, so one of them is definitely being more open to the possibilities of technology that's out there in the market, being more accepting to it, and actually going out there and learning about them. I'm not saying that there needs to be a change today, not saying there needs to be a change this year even, but just really start opening up your minds and your ears to what options are out there and starting to learn about them. Because again, going back to choosing the right for your organization, it might not be the first one you come across. It might be the second. It might be the seventh. Who knows? So I definitely think that should be one takeaway. The second one is definitely understanding where the benefit is going to come from the leaders and your team as a whole, right? Understanding, we talk about ROI a lot, and sometimes it's not as simple as, oven costs X amount and will reduce labor by X amount. With technology, it's a little bit different. So thinking about the ROI possibilities, let's think about something as simple as temperature sensor technology,
Mm,
right? And where you can get a real time update
yeah,
or alert, rather, or notification when there's a temperature issue with a major walk in cooler or freezer.
yeah,
I've been in so many locations where that has happened. It happens everywhere, but
yeah,
that piece of technology, the cost of it could pay for itself with one, malfunction of that piece of equipment. Because instead of throwing out thousands and thousands of dollars of food for pennies on the dollar, you just prevented it from having to get thrown out because you were able to act in enough time. So really starting to understand the ROI in terms of the technology that you're looking for.
yeah.
And I would say the third one is understand that you are not alone. You are not alone. Not only are there resources externally, such as all of us here, there are resources in your peers. So speak with them, learn what they're using, learn what has worked, what has not worked. Really just get out there and not just speaking with the different solutions that are out there, but your community of your peers as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So if people want to connect with you because they're excited about the technology you talked about, or want to learn more about you, or get some fine dining tips, how do they connect?
My cooking doesn't come cheap. If you want me to cook, but I will do it. If you want to find me, the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I have my name is not very popular, Joshua Miller. So what you're going to have happen is a sea of Joshua Millers are going to pop up. But if you type in on LinkedIn, Joshua Miller, CP-FS, that's for Certified Professional Food Safety. As soon as you start typing that in, my name will pop up at the top. So that's the easiest way to find me. Not on like Facebook or all those other platforms to date. So that's the easiest and best way to find me. Also, my website is rfoodsolutions.com. That's the letter R, foodsolutions.com.
Perfect.
You can schedule a call right through there or LinkedIn. So I'm happy to connect with anyone that wants to continue the conversation or chat about anything else.
Awesome. And you are connected to this event as well. So people will be able to just click your name right there.
And I was jotting down your website so that I can put it in the link too. So
yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
There as well.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Josh, this has been such a fantastic conversation around technology and the benefits of technology, and even some roadblocks, right, on implementation of technology that we hope our audience will find solutions as they're thinking about what's next for them. Or maybe they've identified some technology and they're thinking, okay, how are we going to really implement this in a way that's most beneficial to our people and our business? So we thank you so much for your perspective, because it really is valuable.
Thank you. And this has been so much fun. Again, we're talking about food safety, just like when you were on my podcast. It's like, how are we having so much fun talking about safety? But we are having so much fun.
That's why we, at our core, are still food safety nerds a bit. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Right. And we're in like company with our audience for sure.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Audience, for being here with us this week. We will see you all next week, same time. In the meantime, Jill gave a plug for our online learning. Check it out. We launched it on World Food Safety Day on the 7th, I believe. And so check it out.
Congratulations.
Of course. Thank you so much. Let us know. Give us feedback, right? We are always open to feedback. We're always open to getting better, but also capitalizing on the things that are great within what we do. So we appreciate any and all feedback. And we will see you all same time next week.
Sounds good. Thanks everybody for joining us. Make it a great week.
Bye everyone.